Thank you to my patrons. Your generosity and commitment to my work is astonishing. Please consider becoming a patron today. Simply click the link in the description below. Thank you.
I think as a Muslim, like I'm talking not my personal, but my religious view, is that like everything, is a test from God. So God, we have free will, and that free will, you're going to be judged upon that, like after you die.
Couldn't God, this all-powerful being, all-knowing being, come up with a better method for testing someone? What kind of a circus is this?
So
what kind of an absolute depraved madhouse is this, that God sends such tests our way? Anytime we get to a point in the conversation where there's a difficulty for you, we kind of jump on to the next subject. Now, I've been charitable and I've just hopped along with you. That's the difference between your God and me. I would never test a child in that way. What kind of monster would do that?
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way. Thank you.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Abdul.
Oh, Abdul, is it?
Yes.
Oh, Abdul, a pleasure to meet you. How are you doing? What do you got for me?
It's actually my first time, doing a TikTok guest.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much. Sometimes I wonder to myself, if you look at things, from a bigger picture, like there is patterns, there is a design. And I mean, like, even if you look us, like, the way for example, our nose is above our mouth, for a purpose.
Yeah.
And that purpose is to smell food before we eat it,
Mm.
But, like, the only way you explain that, the esophagus, people can be choked. Even though there is a purpose for that as well, the death of people, there is a purpose for that. I think everything has a purpose, You might see it like in a, this is a painful way, is this happening? But there is a purpose for that. I mean, for example, like, let's say a lion was hunting a deer, You might think, that deer is going to be in pain, blah, blah. But the purpose is for that deer is to be food for the lion. So if there is patterns, and there must be a designer,
I see what you mean, and I totally understand the intuition. I totally get it. However, there's two things I'll say. First of all, on patterns. We know enough about patterns to know that they can emerge through unguided processes. Tell me, Abdul, have you ever looked at a microscopic picture or an up-close photograph of a snowflake?
No.
So when we finish this live, you don't need to do so now. You can fact check me on this, but I would encourage you to Google snowflakes and look at the crystalline structure of a snowflake. It is a mirrored, intricate pattern. It looks like something that was produced by the most sophisticated and brilliant artists, a designer, if you will. And yet, Abdul, we know that this forms according to the laws of physics. It crystallizes in the air as it descends towards the earth. How incredible is that? And when you look at these crystalline structures, you will agree with me and you will say, wow, that looks like a design. And yet it's just the laws of physics acting upon matter. That's it. So that's just one example, right? The point I'm making, Abdul, is that complexity is not necessarily evidence for design. Whilst I understand the intuition, complexity does not a designer make, right? Designers can produce things that are complex. I grant you that easily. But the mere presence of complexity is not enough to retroactively conclude that a designer was involved, as the snowflake example demonstrates. So that's the first problem I would have with what you're saying. And if I might very quickly, the second problem I had with what you said, Abdul, you said that everything happens for a reason. So even when the gazelle is being eaten alive in the jaws of the lion, asphyxiated by the vice grip's grip of a lion's mighty jaws, that the purpose of the gazelle in that moment is to serve as food. And so this kind of, this way of looking, this lens, this purpose lens, if you look through that lens, you can make sense of all of the misery and suffering in the world. You might not realize this, and maybe you do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm almost done, I promise. But what you've just tied yourself to there, from my perspective at the very least, is this idea that nothing bad actually ever happens. It's all purposeful. And what that means, Abdul, is that you actually forfeit your right to say that anything was awful. Now, I'm limited with the examples I can cite on this platform, and I don't want to get the live deleted or something like that. But let's just phrase it this way. There are people on this planet who are very much attracted to younger members of our society. You get what I'm driving at, Abdul?
For sure, that's a mental illness.
Yeah, I agree. But by your logic, and I know you're not intending this, I'm just giving you one unpleasant outcome of your logic. By your logic, the gazelle in this analogy is the child, and the lion is the adult. And I can use your exact same framing and say, oh, but the purpose of that child there is to be the prey, we shall call it, to avoid the crudeness. And, so nothing really evil has happened as such. Everything has a purpose, right? Now, I'm sure you, as a decent human being, would not want to countenance that. You would not want to agree with that. You would say that that's morally abhorrent, it's despicable, it's disgusting, and I would agree with you. The problem is that your view entails that kind of idea, that no matter what happens, there's a purpose to everything, no matter how evil it is, no matter how gratuitous it seems to us, there's a purpose to it all, and we just have to have faith that this is part of the pattern, that the intelligence is responsible for this, that God is ordering reality this way. And I don't think you want to bite that bullet, Abdul. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think you want to bite that bullet. I think there's a problem with this view of evil in the world. It can't all have a purpose, lest you commit yourself to the analogy I just gave you. What say you?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm a Muslim, okay? And my religion teaches me that everything is a test from God. But I have a question for you. Let's say you were born 500 years ago, okay? And I will try to explain you that in the future there'll be a car, a metal that, can drive itself. Would you believe me if I explained this to you 500 years ago?
Probably not.
So do you think that our intelligence is limited by our time?
Of course it is. There are things in the future that societies will create that we can probably scarcely imagine.
Okay, so if our time, if our intelligence is limited, how can you, with confidence say that, for example, God doesn't exist?
It's a great question. It's a great question, Abdul.
Your intelligence is very limited.
And the answer is I don't, you see. I don't say with confidence that there is no God. Now, you might say, oh, but then you're not really an atheist, Magic Skeptic. And hell, look, maybe you're right? I don't get into these debates about what the word atheist means. I find them to be fruitless. If you would prefer to call me an agnostic, go right ahead. The reason I call myself an atheist is because I live an aggressively secular lifestyle. I attend atheist conventions. I go and watch atheists speak at conferences. I run... I'm limited with what I can say on this platform, but I'm on various platforms making video content about atheism all the time. I live my life as though there are no gods, basically. But at no point do I claim to have certainty that there are no gods, Abdul. I don't claim that. Instead, what I say is, listen, I live my life as if there's no God. I don't currently believe in one. But if Abdul has evidence for the existence of Allah, he can share it with me. And if it convinces me, then I'll believe in a God. It's kind of the same way you treat every other belief, Abdul. You don't go around people don't go around asserting and claiming that unicorns definitely don't exist. People don't go around asserting and claiming that Bigfoot definitely doesn't exist or that aliens definitely don't exist. Instead, they just kind of don't believe those things, until somebody brings them good evidence to change their mind. And that's kind of the position I'm in. If that makes me an agnostic, then call me an agnostic. Fair enough. I could care less about the label. All I'm telling you is that I'm personally not convinced that your God exists. And it's because nobody has presented solid evidence or argument that's led me to that conclusion. Again, that doesn't mean that I'm 100% certain that your God doesn't exist. I'm totally happy to acknowledge my epistemic limits. I'm totally happy to do that.
It's, and even if you, for example, like you have the Bible, we have the Quran, there's many, things that, like, are mentioned even like 1,500 years ago by someone who was illiterate, who couldn't read and write. For example, that the earth was created like an ostrich egg. It was shaped. How did he know this like 1,500 years ago, There is a lot of, even like the way you said, maybe unicorns didn't exist, but I do believe that like myths, that happened ages ago, maybe have like some truth to them,
It's possible. I grant that easily. However, Abdul, what you've done there is appeal to a mystery, right? Let me just grant you that, right? Because I'm not intimately familiar with Quranic or biblical prophecy. These are not subjects that I'm very well read on. So I'll just grant you right off the bat, right? I'll just grant you that all of the Quran's predictions for the future are correct. Okay? I'll grant you that right off the bat. My question would be, how do we explain that? You're going to, understandably, jump straight to, therefore God. But what I would love you to see, and what I would hope you would see, and look, I could be wrong, you could correct me here, maybe I'm mistaken, but as far as I can tell, by my lights, you're still making a leap there. Even if the claims of prophecy in the Quran are correct, it leaves open the question of how do we explain this? You can't just say, therefore God. You actually have to do the work to link the correct prophecies to your God. I can just as easily explain those prophecies with another absurd hypothesis. I could say, therefore, fortune telling is true. Maybe all of these prophecies were predicted by a real, legitimate fortune teller who has the supernatural ability of foresight. Now I've cut your God out of the picture. It just so happens that those prophecies were noted down in the Quran and passed down through history. And here we are at the present. And you're telling me that the prophecies are evidence of your God. And I'm telling you that those prophecies are evidence for the truth of foreknowledge and fortune telling. How would we go about settling which of us is correct? And again, this is all in the assumption that all of the prophecies are true.
Well, with regards to the example that you gave, that, for example, of fortune tellers, as Muslims, we do believe that there is like interdimensional entities. I don't know, you probably call them demons or whatever. We believe that fortune telling, can happen, but they never tell the complete truth. They always tell, half truths, But, like the problem with atheists or maybe agnostics is that there is no certainty at anything, So it's very hard, to debate when there's no certainty.
Well, again, I'm not looking for certainty. And you might believe you have certainty, Abdul, but do you? You can claim that you have certainty. You might feel you have certainty. But at multiple points in this conversation, I've asked you some difficult questions, and you've been very polite, and you've tried your best to answer my questions, and I really appreciate that. But one thing I have noticed about the dialectic, and I'm sure the viewers have noticed it as well, is that anytime we get to a point in the conversation where there's a difficulty for you, we kind of jump on to the next subject. Now, I've been charitable and I've just hopped along with you, but we started off by discussing whether or not your view entails that all evil things are actually necessary. And you responded to that by just saying, oh, well, in my view, everything is justified according to God. And then we just moved on to the next thing.
No, to be honest with you, sorry for interrupting, but with regards to that, I think as a Muslim, like I'm talking not my personal, but my religious view, is that like everything, is a test from God. So God, we have free will, and that free will, you're going to be judged upon that, like after you die, on the choices that you took. And because as a Muslim, we believe that we should have a guideline, and as Muslims, our guideline is the Quran and what the Prophet said. And, as Muslims, we have the same rules for the past 1,500 years ago. Whereas, like, if you look at other religions, all the religions, they change with time. But us as Muslims, we're always the same, whatever it is, 2,100, 2,200. So I think we should have a guideline. But what is your criteria? What is your guideline for morality?
Well, I'm a moral anti-realist, which we can get to in one moment. Just two things you said there. Number one was, you said everything happens for a reason. So again, do you not see, Abdul, how that ties you to the view that you lose all rights to claim that something is evil? If something happens that you think is evil, again, I give you the example of an adult who might wish to harm a child in a particular way. By your standard, by your lights, given the fact that you believe that evil is a tool wielded by God to test us, by your standards, by your lights, you are duty-bound to say that the adult who harms that child was a test sent by God. So you lose your right to say that that's evil. You have to look that child in the eye and you have to tell them, have heart. This was a test sent to you by God, and you will be judged on the basis of how you navigate this test. Now, I don't know about you, Abdul, but that to me is wicked. That is what evil is, according to me. If the word evil means anything, surely it applies there. I would never, that's the difference between your God and me, I would never test a child in that way. What kind of monster would do that? And I assure you, I'm not wishing to be insensitive. I respect you, right? But I find that, do you understand, Abdul, why that's very difficult for me to accept as an atheist? Do you at least understand why I would find that difficult to digest?
I think that's because, personally, our judgments come from who we are. For example, I'm a Muslim guy. My judgment comes based upon, for example, if you were the victim, you probably have a different judgment, So everybody has different judgments. If you look at the bigger picture.
I get that, but I'm talking about from God's perspective. God is looking at this child and sending this predator as a test. And I'm saying that, from God's perspective, why would God do this? Forget about my judgment, your judgment, the child's judgment. Why would God do that?
Okay.
Like, does that not at face value seem a bit contradictory if we're talking about a being who's allegedly all-loving?
Okay, so I'll be talking, from a Muslim perspective, So for us Muslims, we believe that everything, nobody is born in this life we live, in this life. Everybody has trials and tribulations, Nobody has it all, Everybody gets tested on different ways. For example, you can see a rich guy who can't have children. You might see a poor guy, but he has children. Nobody has it all in this life. Even if you think that you're comfortable, today I'm having a good day, tomorrow your dad can die. After tomorrow, your mother can die. So life is not perfect.
I agree with you, of course, that life is not perfect, Abdul. What I'm trying to draw your attention to is that God could make that different. God could have given us a different kind of world. God could have created a different kind of system. And when I'm drawing your attention to some of the more egregious evils that happen within this system, you're telling me, well, look, nobody's life is perfect. And then on the other hand, you're telling me, well, some of these things are tests from God. And I'm just trying to draw your attention to the fact that this commits you to a very unpleasant view where you have to look at all of the most evil and egregious things that are happening in the world. And you're duty bound to say that those things ought happen because they're tests sent by God. And who am I as a feeble, weak-minded human being to question God's judgment? Clearly, God knows best. And so do you not see how that commits you to a view where you lose all rights to claim that something is evil?
But, for example, let's say, I'm just going to give you a scenario, okay? Let's say somebody's working, okay? They probably have a horrible boss, whatever. So they have to, bear this. The end result is for them to get that money in the bank, right?
Abdul, I agree with that example, and I can see how that could lead a person to having a better life, but you're avoiding the trickier examples. You're avoiding the examples where somebody didn't just have a bad boss, they had a boss who, again, I have to be careful what language I use, they had a boss who victimized them in the most personal, private and brutal way, invaded their privacy and perhaps even their body.
Okay.
And by your lights, you have to say the exact same thing you're about to say at the end of this employment example, which is, from God's perspective, this was a test sent in order to improve this person and make them a better person. And my question is, couldn't God, this all-powerful being, all-knowing being, come up with a better method for testing someone? What kind of a circus is this?
So,
What kind of an absolute depraved madhouse is this, that God sends such tests our way? And what does this say about God as a being?
okay, to be honest with you, I'm gonna speak my mind, yeah? So basically, as a Muslim, I believe that, we, like, at the day of resurrection, we are going to be witness. For example, God knows the future, okay? God knows that if he created this person is going to do bad. God knows everything, but why is that? We are so that we can be witness against ourselves. I know
I'm not so sure what you mean by that last part, so we can be witnesses against ourselves. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Okay, so for example, if God, told you that, if God came, on this earth and he told you that you're going to do this bad, you're going to do that bad, you probably won't believe him, or you're probably going to have difficulty to believe that what God knows is the truth. But if you go through this experience, you know that God is always right.
Abdul, it sounds like you're very committed to your faith. It sounds like at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you have placed your faith in Allah, and it clearly offers you a lot of meaning in your life. I've put some criticisms to you. I've put some ideas to you, and I don't know if they will give you some food for thought. I'll certainly think about what you've said, but I'm not so sure there's a whole pile else I can say that's going to get you to see things from my perspective.
What's your name? What should I call you?
I'm Magic Skeptic.
It's very nice to meet you. It's my first time going on TikTok Live. It's a very nice experience.
Well, Abdul, the pleasure was all mine. I really, really appreciate you joining the live tonight and for being so polite and kicking the ball back and forth with me here. It was an honor.
Can I tell you one message before I leave?
Please do.
As a person, always look at things from the bigger picture. Sometimes when we get too specific to details, you might lose the meaning. Always look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, I'll take that advice on board, Abdul. Listen, thank you very much for your time, my friend, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, and have a good day.
My pleasure. Have a good one. Bye-bye.